Welcome to this week's Parsha Shiur, Parsha's Vayeira. Three lovely ideas that I'm looking forward to share with you. And the first is a well-known theme of Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labonim, a theme which features very largely throughout the Sefer of Bereshis, but I want to expand on that based on something I saw in Rabbi Bender's Sefer. Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labonim, which is normally understood to mean that incidents which happen to the Avos is a siman, is a portent, a sign of what will happen to the bonim, to the children, the descendants of the Avos in some future time. Of course, the source for it is the Ramban. He is the one who articulates it, although it comes from Chazal, but that's perhaps the best source for it. And if you take a look at the first box on the page, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I apologize, I think I gave the wrong email address last week. j.golker@gmail.com. The Ramban in last week's address says the following. This is in Perek Yud Beis, Pasuk Vav. I'm going to tell you a rule. Tovin oisai, and understand it. B'chol Parshios habois bin Avram, Yitzchak v'Yaakov. In all the Parshas containing episodes of the lives of the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, for Huinyan Godel is a very important matter. His kiruh Rabbeinu b'derech katzara, that Chazal mentioned it in an abbreviated way. He's referring to the Medrash Tanchuma. Kol ma she'ira le'avos siman labonim. Whatever happened to the Avos is a siman, is a sign for their children. V'lochein ya'arichu ha'ksuvim b'sipur ha'masois v'chafiros ha'be'eros v'shar ha'mikrim. And therefore the Torah tells us at length about episodes, stories, incidents that happened to the Avos. V'yachshav ha'choshev bohem, and the reader may wonder, ki'ilu heim dvarim yutarim. These seem to be redundant, surplus to essential need in reading. Ein bohem ta'eles, what is the purpose of them? V'kulam bohem lelamed hala'osit. But they're all coming to teach us about the future. Ki kashe yovei ha'mikra le'novi mishleishes ha'avos yispoinin mimenu hadova ha'nigzar lovo lezari. Because if you look carefully at the incidents that happened to the Avos, then we can extrapolate from there how to deal with situations in our own lives. Now, Rabbi Yaakov Bender, in his lovely Sefer, this is in the second volume of his Sefer on Parsha, changes the phrase a little bit. He says, not only is it Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labonim, but there's also Teva Avos Siman Labonim, that the nature and the character of the Avos has been transmitted to their descendants, to us, to Klal Yisrael. And that is something really which I'll do soon, which is Reb Chaim Volozhin. He sort of develops that idea. But there are a few ideas just to think about beforehand. Teva Avos Siman Labonim, the nature, the character of the Avos has been transmitted to us. He brings a Gemara in Gittin. Famous Gemara. This is the Gemara that we often do on Tisha B'Av, the Kamtza Bar Kamtza Gemaras, those few daf of Gemara that we're allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av. And this one is from Gemara Gittin Daf Nun Zayin on the base. The pasuk says, this pasuk in Tehillim, Ki olecha hiragnu kol hayom. We sort of have been killed for you all day. The pasuk says, Nechshavnu katzoin tivcha. We've been considered like sheep for the slaughter. Now the Gemara there in Gittin gives a few examples of what this is referring to, and one of them is the famous story of Chana and her 7 sons. Zu isha v'shiva boneho, asyuha lekame dekesa. If I'm not mistaken, they're buried, from memory, in the famous Beis HaKvaros in Sfas, where the Rabbi of Cairo and the Arizal are all buried there. Ramesha Cordovero, and if I'm not mistaken, Chana and along with her 7 sons are buried there. But anyway, the Gemara tells the story of their death. Asyur lekame dekesa. They brought Chana, and they brought the first child in front of the Caesar. Amrulei plach la'avodah zara. And they said to Chana's oldest child, bow down to this avodah zara. Amalahu, he said, no. Kosu b'Torah anochi Hashem Elokecha. It says in the Torah, I serve HaKadosh Baruch Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and therefore I refuse to bow down. Afkuh v'kotluha, they took him out and they killed him. Asyur le'idach lekame dekesa. They then brought the next son. Amrulei plach la'avodah zara. Bow down to this idol. Amalahu kosu b'Torah le'yilechu elehem acherim. Me'al al ponai. You're not allowed to have any other gods. Afkuh v'kotluha, and again they killed the second son. Asyur le'idach, they brought the third son. Amrulei plach la'avodah zara, bow down to the avodah zara. Amaluhu kosu b'Torah zoveach le'elohim yecheram. Anyone who offers up to other gods, yecheram, will be utterly destroyed. Afkuhu v'kotlu, they killed him. Next one, asyur le'idach. Amrulei plach la'avodah zara. Amaluhu kosu b'Torah le'sishtach ve'lelache. You can't bow down to any other gods. Afkuhu v'katlu. Asyur le'idach, the next son. Amrulei plach la'avodah zara. Amaluhu kosu b'Torah shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Afkur v'kodlu, then they killed him. Shiur le'idach, they brought out the next child. Amrulei plachal v'dezara. Amaluhu kosa bater v'yodat hayom hashivos levavecha ki Hashem hu elokim b'shamayim ma'avash mitachas einoid. And then they killed him. The next son, Shiur le'idach, Amrulei plachal v'dezara. Amaluhu kosa bater es Hashem hemartze v'goyim v'Hashem hemircha hayom kvar nishpanu l'kadosh baruch hu she'einu ma'avir nesoi be'elacha. We're not going to, we promised, we made a shvur, we're not going to exchange HaKadosh Baruch Hu for another God. And he has promised us that he is not going to exchange us for any other nation. So then the final child came. So the final child came, and he had the sort of almost rachmanis. He wanted at least one of them is going to be victorious over him. They should bow down to him. So Amalei Keza, the Caesar, said to this youngest child, "Ashtei loch kushbuna v'gochin v'shakle." You know what we'll do? I'll throw down my seal, my stamp, and people will think that you're bowing down to, you're picking up the stamp, and you're not really bowing down to me, you're picking up the stamp. That people will say, people will say that he's accepted the king's authority, and that's like a sort of a compromise, and that the kid said, no way. Woe to you, Caesar. If you think, for the sake of your own honor, that I should fulfill your command, and bow down to you. So they took him out and they killed him. To be killed. So the mother, who had just witnessed her 6 sons die and the 7th one being taken out to be killed, they said, just give me a moment, let me kiss my child before you kill him. So she said to him, Bonai, my dear child, go tell Avram Avinu, Avram your father, that you set up one mizbeach for the Akedah in this week's Sedra, but I actually had 7 Akedas. Afhi also Lagag, and then the story continues after they killed the 7th and final child. She went up to the roof, and Noflo Mason, she died. Yotze Baskal Omra, and a Baskal came out and said, Eim Habonim Smecha, that the joyful mother of children, again a pasuk in Tehillim. It's a very sad and very poignant Gemara. One point that Rav Benzer quotes Rav Shach, a fascinating insight. What exactly was Chana doing? What was this mother doing? Was it almost like a competition that she was telling Avram Avinu that you did 1, I did 7? You bound up 1 son. Well, what did it mean? So Rav Shach said on this Gemara an amazing insight. It wasn't, of course, a competition, but she was telling him, she was giving a message, as it were, to Avram Avinu, that because he had bound up his son, that he imbued each and every one of his descendants, each and every Yid has been imbued forever with the ability to be Moshe Nefesh. And therefore, I'm thanking him, I'm praising him. Thank you, Avram Avinu, you have instilled in our DNA this ability. A different take on it. And that really leads us very squarely onto a famous shtickle of Reb Chaim Volozhin. Reb Chaim Volozhin, the premier disciple of the Vilna Gaon, in Ruach HaChaim, in his commentary on Pirkei Avos, has an amazing piece. In the 5th parak of Pirkei Avos, the Mishnah says, Asar nisyonis nisnas Avram Avinu, that Avram Avinu had 10 tests, v'omad b'kulam, and he passed all of them. Now the Ruach HaChaim on that Mishnah says an amazing thing. Let me read it to you. Kan Oma Avram Avinu. He makes the following points. Asar nisyonis nisnase Avram Avinu. That Avram is referred to as Avinu. Or Le'el, and just a little bit earlier in the same parak, it says there are 10 generations, min Noach va'ad Avraham. It doesn't say Avinu. V'loi Oma Avinu. Yirtze b'zeh ma pima shekosov. This is perhaps highlighted by a pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk says, Mishalech besumoy tzadik, ashrei bonov achrov. Someone who goes with perfection, his children will follow him afterwards. What does that mean? Ki kama midas shatzadik torach v'yogel hasigo. A tzaddik works hard. He toils to achieve levels in Yiddishkeit. Levonov achrov hema kateva mutba. But what the tzaddik has worked hard on, then it will become natural for his children. L'mashal, imagine you have a Baal Tshuva, and he's come to Yiddishkeit late for reasons not of his own fault. He didn't grow up in a family which is Shomer Shabbos, and he works hard and battles all the challenges, and he becomes a Shomer Shabbos. His children are not going to have the temptation of violating Shabbos in the same way that he did. So, mishalich betumei tzadik, ashrei bonov achrov. If like the Chaim Volozhin says, he worked very hard to achieve that level of Yiddishkeit. It's almost like nature. It's part of the DNA of the children. And with minimal effort, they will achieve what the Father has achieved. You see this in practice. Listen to this. Says Chaim Volozhin, you see regular people, quote unquote, who are moisa nefesh for Kiddush Hashem, v'hu mutba bonu me'avinu Avraham, and that has been implanted with us, has been given to us in our very fabric by Avraham Avinu. Shemosa nafshe le'ur kastim al emunasei. When Avraham Avinu had that nisayon of ur kastim, that he was put into the fiery furnace because of his belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that has instilled in us the ability to do the same. And that's why you see down the generations, thousands, tens of thousands of Jews have demonstrated this emunah, which has been implanted in us by Avraham Avinu. And he carries on. V'chein kol ha'asar nisyonis, and it's true with all of the 10 tests that Avraham Avinu had. Hayu leheishir haderech lefonenu, which has been to straighten the way for us. V'chein hisoris la'adam pitam leilech le'eretz hakodesh. Think about it. Sometimes you hear of people, they're upping everything and they're going to Eretz Yisrael. They're upending their lives. They've got situations in Chutz La'aretz where they're comfortable, life is fine, they've got parnasa, they've got everything they need, and yet there's something missing. They just up everything and go to Eretz Yisrael. Hu min nisayon lech lecha. That is really the nisayon of lech lecha, the Kabbalah called Ovdim Mishmai Letav nisayon harav shlehir achamidus Hashem Yisbarach. In other words, Avraham Avinu overcame that, and therefore it's instilled it that A, the desire, and B, the ability to do it. That is the Yerusha from Avraham Avinu. And that's why it says Avraham Avinu, Asor Nisyonis Nisnas Avraham Avinu, because it's not just counting generations like in the earlier Mishnah, Menuach al Avraham. It's Avraham Avinu because he's an Av in as much as he's instilled these qualities and these characteristics in us, in his descendants. Now, so that's really one of the features of this week's Edra. Apart from Ma'aseh Osim and Lebonim, you have the Akedah, and the Akedah has, as the Ruach HaChaim says, has given us the ability to have, together with the other Nisyonis that Avraham Avinu had, that is who we are. That is made up the quality, the DNA of Klal Yisrael. He then takes it a step further. Rav Bender makes an amazing observation. There is a famous Gemara with Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says in Brachas Samach Aleph on the base, if you look at the top of the next page, the Gemara in Brachas says the following. Famous and very sad Gemara. When the moment they brought Rabbi Akiva out to be killed. Zman Kriya Shema Hoya. Says the Gemara in Bracha Samach Aleph from a base that it was the time of Kriya Shema, and they were torturing Rabbi Akiva with rakes of iron. They were removing his skin from him. And at that moment, Rabbi Akiva was makabel al malchus shamayim. Omru Talmid Rabbeinu ad kan. How can you do it? Omru lohem kol yomai hayisi mitztal pasuk zeh b'chol nafshecha. All my life I was wondering about this pasuk. B'chol nafshecha, we say in Shema every day. Afilu noitelis nishmascha. Amarti mosa yovoi liyodi va'akaimenu. When will the time come that this opportunity will come my way and I'll be able to fulfill it? Va'achshav sheba liyodi. Now I have the opportunity to fulfill it. Lo ya'akaimenu, I shouldn't fulfill it. Hayamarich be'echad. He was saying Shema with astonishing loftiness. And he was ma'arich be'echad. He prolonged the word echad at the end of the pasuk. Ad sheyotz nishmosa be'echad. And with that final word echad, that was how he expired and left this world. Yotz sabas kol v'omra ashrecha Rabbi Akiva sheyotz nishmosa be'echad. Happy are you, Rabbi Akiva, that your soul has departed you when you've said the word echad. Atkan, the Gemara, famous Gemara, again a very poignant and very sad, a very powerful Gemara. But here comes the amazing thing. Rabbi Bender makes an astonishing point. Rabbi Akiva was descended from Geirim. All his life, he wondered whether the gifts bequeathed to him by Avraham Avinu were to be found within him as well. Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, as we just explained, says that the Asar Nisyonis, those midas, and that Avraham Avinu was able to emulate, was able to aspire to and achieve, have now become in the DNA of the Jewish people, his descendants. So that is his legacy, and that is our heritage. That is part of who Klal Yisrael is. Rabbi Akiva was descended from Gerim. He wasn't sure if the gifts bequeathed to Avraham Avinu to Klal Yisrael were to be found in him as well, because he joined the club later. And of course, he was so happy at this final moment of life in this world that he did have the strength of character to do it, that he too would be the recipient of the gifts bequeathed to him by Avraham Avinu. And an amazing insight and a new sort of angle on that Gemara. Rabbi Bender tells the story of a famous person called Rabbi Yossel Friedenson. Rabbi Yossel Friedenson is no longer alive, but he was one of the famous survivors of the Holocaust and made major contributions to American Jewry and world Jewry, particularly in his writing in Agudas Yisrael. And he recalled one time a Simchas Torah in the concentration camps. And in the barracks, late at night, on Simchas Torah, it's hard to even picture and fathom this, but they were singing the piyut of Ein Adir Kashem, which we sang a few weeks ago. It's a piyut that many people sing during the Hakaf as they go around the bima, and they sing Ein Adir Kashem, and the whole piyut. And they were singing that. And at that moment, one of the Nazi officers came into the barrack and screamed, "What's going on? What are you singing?" He demanded to know. And Rabbi Yossel Friedenson explained that it was a song expressing the power of God, the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the blessings bestowed upon the Jewish people. And the guard screamed and said, "Do you really believe that? Like, look around you, look what you're suffering, look at the barracks, look, you're being exterminated, you're being persecuted. Do you really believe that?" And the barracks went quiet. 1,000 people in most of the barracks went to deathly silence. And then suddenly, from a corner of the room, there was a voice, strong and confident, which said, "Ja, ich glaub," yes, I believe. And it came from a corner of the room, from a young man who was an inmate, not known to be religious and not shown any interest in keeping Torah and mitzvahs until that point. And as his voice pierced the silence, other men began to nod and echo his words, "Ich glaub," I believe, it coming from all over. And this guard, in utter bewilderment, walked out of the barrack and said, "Hitler will never be able to destroy you." Which is really the point. That you see tremendous qualities that Klal Yisrael have, and that is the legacy of Avraham Avinu, the legacy of this week's Sedra, of, as Rabbi Bender calls it, Teva Ovos Siman Abonim. The nature, the lofty levels which the Ovos have achieved. It's not just Siman, Maisa Ovos Siman Abonim, but it's the Teva which has been instilled in us and gives us the qualities to achieve sometimes breathtaking levels. And we've seen that in the Gemara in Gittim with Chana and the 7 sons, that Reb Shach explained that because the message she was giving back to Avraham Avinu was because he had bound up his son and he had imbued each and every one of us forever with the ability to be Moshe Nefesh. And that's what Reb Chaim Volozhin says is true with all the Asar Nisyonis. And that's the explanation of the Gemara in Brachas Daf Samach Aleph and Beis with Rabbi Akiva. Because he was descended from Gerim, he wondered, did this gift apply to him as well? The answer is yes. And that's manifested countless times throughout our recent history and our longer history. And, as Rabbi Yossel Friedenson described, it's something which manifested itself then as well. Let's move on. Just a question. This is an interesting observation that I heard from Rabbi Hartman. This is later on in the Parsha, Perek Chof Aleph. This is in box number 2 if you're looking at the sheet on the second side. The Pasuk says, "Vashem pokad es sora." So again, a very famous feature in this week's Parsha. And Vashem pokad es sora. Now, Rashi says in Pasuk Aleph of Perek Chof Aleph the following: Somach Parsha Zu. The reason why this Parsha follows straight on from the Parsha immediately beforehand of Avimelech, to teach us, anyone who davens for another person and he needs the same thing, he will be answered first. And Rashi based it on Gemara and Baba Kama Daf Tzadi base. etc. In other words, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Avraham Avinu davened that he davened, and then Hashem pokad esor shepokta kvar kodim shiripes Avimelech. that Avimelech was healed